Hi everyone and welcome back to the Crafty Yellow Camper, and today I've got a video for you which is another version of the double vision card. I've made this one using some retired papers. I've been having a bit of a sort out in my craft room and I had quite a lot of retired papers, and in actual fact several packs of this particular designer series paper. So on a bit of a mission this year to use up paper before I buy any more, so which I've already broken because I have already bought some more, but we're going to use this. They're a really nice sort of scenic paper, and on the backs they've sort of got a painterly thing. So this is one version of the double vision card, and I'm going to show you how to make this, but I'm going to make it in a slightly different orientation. So this is a C6 size card, so it'll fit in a standard UK C6 envelope, which is half of an A4 sheet. This particular one is cut down the length of the card at 10.5 centimetres, and it gives us a card when it's folded of 14.8 by 10.5. Okay, so let me bring in the bits that I've sort of prepared to make this video not too long, and I'll show you how I put that together. Okay, so this card is going to be a standard C6 portrait version, whereas that was landscape. So what I've done, I've got my piece of designer series paper here. I've got a card base, which is again half of an A4 sheet, but this time cut across the width. So this is 14.8 along here, and it's scored at 10.5 and folded, which gives us a portrait C6 card base. What I've then done is I've used my stitched rectangle dies, and you could use any die for this, providing it fits onto the front of your card, basically. So what I've done is I've then gone ahead and out of some scrap paper, I've cut another rectangle. I've used the same rectangle to cut out the center of the piece of designer series paper. It's lovely paper. I could have just cut this and then used an extra piece of paper, but that's quite wasteful in my opinion. So you're not going to see it once that's stuck on there, so it made sense to cut the piece we're going to chop up from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is glue down our edge, if you like, of designer series paper. You can see this one's got a really nice blue. Some of the colours that are in here, you've got old olive, garden green, misty moonlight, blackberry bliss, and there is might be calypso coral, but yeah, there's quite a lot of colours in this. And looking at this, I think there might also be some Highland. Oh no, that's blackberry bliss. I was going to say Highland heather. Anyway, right, so that's our edge, if you like, stuck down to the card base. Now we need to deal with this piece. Now on this landscape position card, I've cut down that way, but on the other one we're going to do it this way. So this measures, this particular die, I'm sure in centimetres because the rest of my card's in centimetres. This particular die is 10 centimetres by 6.5, basically. So to make the maths a bit easier, we're going to slice this up into 2 centimetre pieces, which is what I've done on here, and that will give us 5 pieces, which works well because it's 3 glued down and 2 popped up. Okay, so what we could do actually is slice this into, just to make life even more difficult, slice this into 1 centimetre pieces. That's 6.5 across, so that doesn't divide as well, but if we divide it that way, so it's going across the card that way, right. Now I'm using the Stampin' Up trimmer, and the easiest way, you can see I can line that up there really nicely, but then I'm relying on not moving it around too much. So the easiest way to cut these small increments is to go to the other side of the cutting blade. So that's one. Now the really important thing to do with this is to try and keep it in the right order. because if you don't, your picture might not make sense. And I've already spun it over without realising. 1, 2. So I'm just going along and I'm cutting these into 1 centimetre increments. This should give us 10. Gave us 5 on the 2 centimetre, which is ideal because it's 3 down and 2 up, but just for the sake of ringing the changes. It doesn't have to be an even amount, an odd amount, as long as you make sure you keep your things in the right order. So this should be our last one. Okay, what's happened there? We've got one that's slightly... Oh, I wasn't expecting it to do that. All right, anyway, there we go. Right, so I'm just going to move that trimmer out of the way. And then what we're going to do, we're going to use this piece of, this is actually basic grey cardstock, to mount them on. Now you could just mount the paper directly onto your card base, but because this is designer series paper and not cardstock, it's not as thick. So I think it'll be better if it's mounted onto a piece of cardstock. Okay, so I'm going to bring in my glue. Now we're going to start with one glued down. We've got this one that's an odd... Sorry, I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm just going to move those over a bit. We've got this one that's a little bit thinner than the others, and I'm guessing that's our odd 6.5. Anyway, so we're going to start with that left-hand one, and I'm basically matching it up, making sure it's lined up. And I'm using wet glue for this rather than a tape runner because it's easier to make sure it's lined up. So the next one will then go on with dimensionals. So I'm bringing in my mini dimensionals here for this one, and that one will then line up. That one will then line up against the first one. Now, I have seen people do this, and they have started from the middle, but we know that this piece of DSP is going to fit on this piece of cardstock because it's cut out with the same die. If you weren't using a die and you just cut your shape, then I probably would start from the middle. Okay. So we're just going to go along, just making sure that they're lined up. Now, the idea is to have them buttered up one against the other, not gaps in the middle. That's a different technique. Okay, so this is our second one with... So I'm going sideways, even though this card is going up and down, just purely because it makes it easier for me to line them up sideways. So you don't, if you're using a 1 centimetre strip like this, you don't want to put too much glue on the back because we don't want it to squidge out. So just carry on along the strip, just making sure you've got them the right way up, and that the illustration matches. It's that way. It is easy to turn them up the wrong way or get them in a muddle, particularly if it's something that doesn't have a very defined picture on it. So it is worth taking a few minutes, a few seconds, just to make sure that your image is matching. So this kind of technique is really good for patterned papers that have a picture on, or a picture you've stamped Now you see I very nearly had that one on upside down. Okay, so we've got 2 more. Now this one's confusing because it's almost exactly the same on both sides. Okay. So this is our last glued strip. I'm just going to have to pick that up, sorry, so I can get that level. I think I might have one that's slightly on the wonk. Yeah, this one. The good thing about dimensionals is if you don't press them down too hard, you can pick them back up again and move them. So the last one, the one before the last one I just stuck on, had gone over slightly to the left because I'm trying not to get my head over it in order to keep it in the camera so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, before that glue dries, I'm just making sure that's lined up, and then we know which way around this one goes because it is it's got that edge. Now you can see that I'm slightly over somewhere, so there's obviously a couple on here that aren't buttered up correctly, but it won't affect what we're now going to do. Okay, so what we're now going to do is put this back in to the hole we cut it out of. Now it is hanging slightly over, so I've obviously got too big a gap. I can see exactly where there's a little bit too much of a gap there, but it's fine. So I'm going to now put some glue on the back of that. So on the card I showed you at the beginning, this one here, I've actually raised that up on dimensionals. But this time I'm going to glue this one down back into the aperture where it came from. So I'm just going to open that card out. It's always easier to line things up when you've not got a card bouncing around. Now, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pick that up to see if that's in square. Yep, okay. So that's that. So on this one, we're landscape, and we've got the slices of the picture going from left to right. On this one, we've got them going top to bottom. I don't know which I prefer, actually. I think I almost prefer left to right. But on this one, the first one I showed you, I cut this at 2 centimetres per strip, whereas this one, I've cut this at 1 centimetre per strip. And it just gives you that sort of optical illusion of it being double. Okay, so those are the 2 cards. The other variation that I've done is with a stamped image. So I'm just going to show you how I made that. I'm just going to grab a stamp set. Okay, so this works well with this is Faraway Landscapes, which is one of the newer photopolymer stamp sets, and this kind of image works really well for this kind of technique. You can cut them straight or you can cut them into a shape. I've done a card already with this, with it cut into an oval. So I'm going to grab a block. Now I'm doing this card for a demonstration at a card class, so I've packed most of my blocks already. So which one are we going to pull out? We'll pull out this one. Actually, this would make a really nice Christmas version of this card. So I am going to find some ink to stamp it in. I'm going to use one of the new colours, Peaceful Pine. Now these are intended to be watercoloured as well, but you don't have to. Right, so these are our new ink pads. So they actually come apart, so there's no fiddling with the lids, and the back just slips on like that. So I'm just going to ink that up. I'm actually going to bring a stamp mat in because they are photopolymer and I'm stamping on a glass grid. Okay, now I need to leave enough room for me to be able to cut that out. So let's give that a stamp. Okay, so that's our image stamped. And then again, I'm going to bring in the, sorry, I need a bigger desk. I'm going to bring in those rectangle dies. Okay, excuse me, I'm going very slightly mad. What on earth have I done with the things? I've got one left in the packet. I'm going absolutely mad. Okay, let's see if that one in the packet that's left fits. It sort of does, but it's not big enough. I need to find what I've done with the rest of them. Anyway, you get the idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out with a rectangle die. If I can find what I've done with the rest of them. Had them all here a minute ago. Ah, here they are. Process averted. Okay, I'm going to cut that out with an appropriately sized rectangle die, which I think will be this one. Yep, look at that, perfect fit. I'm going to cut that out with that, and then we'll do exactly the same thing as we did before with the designer series paper, in that we will cut it into strips. Now this is stamped on basic white, so I could get away without cutting a piece of cardstock for this to go on, simply die cutting that. I could colour in elements if I wanted to, but I think that's actually going to look quite nice like that. Let me just finish that card while we're on the video. So I'm just taking this over to my stamp and cut and emboss machine to cut out the image. If you're using dies, thin dies like this, edgeless dies, try and remember to use them at different angles when you put them through your die cutting machine, particularly these really thin edge dies, or you'll end up with warped dies. So I cut that sideways. There we go, that's that cut out. I'm just going to put the lid on this ink pad. I don't want to get ink everywhere. Move that out of the way. So I've now cut that with our rectangle die, and we're going to chop that up. Now it's a scene that goes in landscape, so obviously that is the only way to cut it. So I'm just going to check our measurements again. Yeah, 10 centimeters across. So we're going to cut that into, we could cut it into twos, which will give us 5 pieces, but I'm not going to. I want to work out why that didn't work last time, because we had a little bit left, didn't we? It should, in theory, cut into 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. 6. This is where it gets tricky. 7. 8. Oops, daisy. We lost one. 8. 9, 10. Right, now I know I've just realised why we've got a thin bit, because I measured the outside of the die and it cuts on the inside of the die, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, we're going to grab ourselves something to go on the back for a because we're going to make this as a Christmas card. I'm going to grab a piece of cherry cobbler. Just so happens that I have a piece that's the right size. Okay. Right, so I'm going to fold this in half. So this is an A4 sheet of cherry cobbler that's been cut down the length of the sheet at 10.5, and I'm just burnishing that edge. Okay, so we're going to go this way. Now, I think we need something on the back just to give it a little bit of definition. So we could go with that. I really need a piece with green on. That would look nicer. Okay, so I'm going to just chop this down. I'm making this up as I go along, guys, but I'm going to chop this down. We want this chopped down to 14.8, and then it will go across the whole width of the card. So just taking a sliver off there. That's my score on blade throwing itself off again. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to glue this down onto my card base. I glued the right side, yeah. So we're not using the scenery side this time. We're just using it as a bit of a backing to our stamped scene. And because it's one of those sort of painterly effects, it doesn't matter which way up it goes. And then we're going to start with our image. Now, I haven't got a piece of cardstock behind this to make sure that I'm lining it up. So we are going to have to sort of work out where we want to put it. And if you're doing this with a die, one of the tips is to reuse the die. Just trying to work out which one it was. Yeah. So I want it sort of there. And this is why the measurements weren't right. Look, so this has got 2 lines of stitching, and this actually cuts after that first line of stitching. I don't know if you can see that if I hold it up. There are 2 lines of stitching, so this outer line of stitching remains on the piece you've cut the shape out of, and it actually measures there. So that's why it's a little bit different. So by using this die, will give me a good idea of where I want my pieces to go. So we've got our left-hand piece there and our right-hand piece there, pretty much. And then they should. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put dimensionals on the back of these, mini dimensionals, and then we can adhere those down, and then that will give us our parameters for the rest. So that's that one. And there's that one. So yeah, so pay attention to where your die actually cuts. That's just left me with a little one strip that's a little bit thinner because of how the die cuts. So right, let's line this up again. Okay, so this is the right hand side of my image, so I know that that's where I want the image to show, and I'm just lining that up. And then I'm going to do the same with the left hand side, which although it's a skinnier one, it will still work. Yeah, so you know, it's easier if your image is a certain size that divides, but it's not the end of the world if it doesn't. All right, I'm just moving that over a little bit because I don't want to end up sticking this to the die. Okay, so that's, oh, come on. Which is exactly what I have done, stuck it to the die. Okay, so that's our left and our right. So we know that that is level. Just checking the bottoms. Yeah, so from there on in, we can go up and down with our other pieces. So this was on dimensionals, so this one's got to be on glue. So we're going to slide this one in. Just try and make sure that you get it level without having to try and move it around too much, because the glue. So we're working from our outsides in, so I'm going to glue this one as well. Sorry, although the glue does give you wiggle room to get it level, if you have too much glue, it will dry shiny if it squidges out. So this one is going, and we want to make sure that it's buttered right up to the previous one. Now, that's a little bit high. It is definitely far easier if you've got a piece of card underneath that you are lining things up to, but I wanted to show you that this does equally work. So now we're back on dimensionals for each of our ends. So that's our one for that side, and we need our one for this side. Okay. So I'm just gonna pop that one in there. And we're going to go for this one as well. Now, as I said, make sure you've got them the right way up. That very nearly went on upside down. Okay, and we're butting that right up against the glued one. So these two are now glue. Again, so I'm bringing my glue in. Daisy. The only trouble with having nail polish on, it makes it really hard to pick up thin strips of paper. Okay, or cardstock I should say. Right, so those are going in, and just as you go across, just check that you have lined them up level. They seem to be creeping up a little bit on that side, so I'm just putting that one down a bit. Right, so that's those two down. Now we've got two strips left, so one's got to be up and one's got to be down, which presents us with a little bit of a problem. But we'll put this one in first up. We may have to have the middle two up because I started at each end. So basically work it out for yourselves. Don't just blindly copy me, because it really should be one up and one down. But anyway, so this one is going to be raised. You can see I'm slightly out of line there, which is what makes it easier. And that one's going to go in there. So I think we're going to have to raise that one up as well. So it definitely makes it easier if you've got a piece of cardstock behind your image, because you know that you're going to line that up to the size of the piece of cardstock, and it's definitely going to be level then. Whereas trying to line it up without a piece of cardstock behind is not as easy. And this one is just going to fit in there. Like that. It's not quite level. I'll just take that off again. So coming in from the outside seems to have presented me with another little bit of a problem, in so much as this is a bit higgledy-piggledy. So you can see, I mean, it's okay. People that don't make cards wouldn't be that fussy about it, but you can see that it's a bit up and down at the top. So although it does work like that, I think my advice is always going to be to have another piece of cardstock behind there, which gives you something to line it up to. Anyway, you get the idea. So let me bring those other two cards back in to show you. So this one was our landscape, and this is cut into 2 centimetre pieces. This one was our portrait, and that was cut into 1 centimetre pieces. And then this one was a stamped image that we have cut into 1 centimetre pieces, and this isn't mounted up on a piece of cardstock. And I think if I were to do this again, that's what I would do. I would stamp the image and then mount it up on another piece of cardstock. You can use a piece of scrap cardstock because you're not going to see it. Okay, so those are our 3 cards. Hope you like them, and I hope you'll give this technique a try. As I said, I've used dies, the stitched rectangle dies. It works with more or less any shaped die, so long as your image fits in it. If you're just using pattern papers like I have here, then obviously it doesn't really matter what shape the image is because you're putting it back into the papers. If you're going to have a go at this technique where you've stamped an image, obviously you need to make sure that your die that you're using is going to fit in. The other thing I would normally do, obviously, as well as add a sentiment, but I don't know who I'm going to send these to yet, so I'm not going to add a sentiment quite yet. And this one's probably going to be a Christmas one, and I haven't dug out my Christmas sentiments yet. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope it's given you some ideas, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now, and happy stamping.